Mister, how do you operate this Twitter thing or this Instagram thing or whatever the heck? You're supposed to know all this stuff. Anyway, welcome back to the show.
You know, the joy I get in doing this show is all the people that I meet. And I had someone ask me recently, how do you get some of the guests that you do? In this particular case, it was purely on a whim. It was purely on a whim because when I listened to this man's sports talk show, I got hooked. So I said the heck with it. I'll reach out to him and I'll see what happens. He and I have been brothers since, and he just recently celebrated a little thing we like to call a Stanley Cup championship, which means two of his teams won championships compared to only one of mine. I love him dearly. Please help me welcome the one, the only Rod Pedersen. And he joins me right now. Rod, how are you, my man? Great to talk to you.
Buddy, I'm alive, and that means it's a win. You know how that is.
Yes, I do indeed. It is indeed a win. And speaking of a win, how about those Cats? Stanley Cup champions. Are you down yet from your high about that?
It sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
But I'll be honest, man. There's a lot of folks like yourself, media people, saying that. But you also know I had absolutely nothing to do with it other than being a barnacle stuck on the bottom of the boat, just along for the ride. That's all. So it's nice. It really served our podcast well. I mean, I'm doing another show now just on the Panthers and the Lightning, and them going all the way to the Stanley Cup 2 straight years has really helped. It's been good for business, Snowman. Winning is good for business.
Really
Write it
is.
down. Write it down.
It really is, and it's something I've known for the length of time that I've been in broadcasting. I had a chance to see the Blackhawks do it at home in Chicago in 2015 when they clinched at home against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you want to talk about a place that was a madhouse. I know South Florida was a madhouse when the final horn sounded. I listened to the end of the radio broadcast.
Oh my God!
And that was such a thrill for me to hear. If it was a thrill for me to hear the Blackhawks broadcast, but to hear the guys that are the voices of the Panthers wear out the final 10 seconds and then just all the rules, and you said it in your interview, and I caught that episode, all the rules go out the window.
Well, I appreciate you catching that. And it's funny because those broadcasters by name are Doug Plagans is the play-by-play guy who's initially from Detroit, but this was, I think, his 9th season with the Panthers. Yep. And the color guy who lost his ever pick in mind was Bill Lindsay. And so Billy, until this June, was the face of the Florida Panthers in South Florida because he scored the biggest goal in the history of the franchise back in 1996.
Yeah,
and
the Stanley Cup final,
right? And they call him in South Florida Mr. Panther, so that's pretty good, right? And the thing is, again, I feel kind of bad, Snowman, because I showed up there 3 years ago, tagging along for the ride, and this championship was a culmination of 30 years, of which a lot of people had been there for a long time and suffered through a lot of bad crap. But back to that call, if you watch the show, Bill said he felt terrible because he when I said he lost his mind, he lost his mind. And if you saw the video of it, he was like spraying water all over.
Oh, I saw it.
I would have tasered you if I was, and then he felt bad because he trampled all over the play-by-play guy's call. And Bill's been doing radio long enough to know that's a pretty big deal. But just the other day, I was listening to NHL radio, and they played that call. And if you recall, Brian, Dougie Plagans is going 10, 9, 8. And he probably had some iconic phrase ready to go. But Bill just jumped all over it. He's like, Lord Stanley, you're finally coming home to South Florida. And it actually sounded great. But Bill just felt bad for ruining his buddy's call. And so I texted him after. I'm like, you didn't ruin anything, Bill. It sounded great. And as you said, the raw emotion, that's what people want.
I've done state championships for high school. I've done college championships. As I said, I was there for the Blackhawks in 2015, and I got a piece of John Weideman's call that will forever stick
Yeah.
in my mind. Matter of fact, I got all three from 10 in Philadelphia, 13 in Boston, and 15 in Chicago. And I know this from experience. For most of my time, I've been a solo act. But when you have a partner with you
Oh,
that sees something for the first time ever, the rules just go out the window. And when I did the state championship in 2014, Donna Kavanaugh, dear friend, was with me, and she did the same thing that Bill Lindsay did after the overtime horn ran out. And she texted me a week later, and she says, "I'm so sorry that I ruined your call." I said, "Honey, you're fine. Your alma mater won the state championship for the first time in school history." And she says, "Yeah, but that was your call." I said, "Do you know how many people wrote to me and said that we both sounded great?" So it's nothing else. They add to it. And Bill, like you said, it was a culmination of 3 decades of what Panther fans have suffered. To have that happen in June, to finally celebrate in June something other than a conference title. I mean, the rules and the emotions are so raw, and the rules go out the window.
I want to say something to you as well. I see WQEE in the top window. Are we on Key Radio right now in Atlanta?
Yep.
Are we on? All right.
We are.
Well, shout out Rhino Radio. Such a great guy.
Yes,
Does a
sir.
great job.
Yes, sir.
You, me, him, and guys and gals like us are kindred souls. And I think if any young broadcasters are listening right now or watching, they should really pay attention to what we're talking about, because I'm up here broadcasting baseball, as you know, for the first time in my life. I'm doing baseball play-by-play. And I don't know about you, but it really helps to have played the game. I don't know what sports
Yes.
you played growing up. I never played football. And I broadcast 20 years in the Canadian Football League. It's kind of a big deal, but I never played football. I faked it for 20 years. When I was done, I was like, it was a relief. Baseball I played, so I'm finding it easier. But when you said to have a partner with you, I've been doing these games streaming video all year, but I had a guy come into the booth for an interview from the league last week, and I'm like, this is night and day having a guy beside, like night and day.
It is.
Right?
It is.
And but you do it with a guy on your own, whatever. You do whatever it takes to get the job done. And that's what Ryan O'Radio knows, because he's a radio guy first.
Yes.
And I mean, I just look at all these young broadcasters. You and I are about the same age, and I don't know about Ryan O'Radio. I shouldn't speak for him. I think he's around our age. And it's like, I see all these young kids that want to get into broadcasting. I'm like, come on down to the ballpark. I'm busy.
Exactly.
What are you paying? And it's like, do you want to do this or do you not? Because it leads to moments like what Bill Lindsay had and what I've had and what you've had. And I don't know if my ball club is going to win a championship this year or not, the Millers. I don't know. But I know I'm going to be there in the end. And so if you're just there for something to do, or you want to stay in fancy hotels and you're in it for the chicks, those things are great too. But if you're not in it for broadcasting, don't come.
No, because you're not going to love it. You're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to appreciate the grind that it takes to get there. Because the first sport I ever played and grew up watching was baseball. And my dad and my granddad got me into it. I'm from Chicago, been a White Sox fan all my life, and my dad took me to my first game long time ago. That's how I got into it. So when you're there, when something major happens, like I was in 2005, when the White Sox won it all, and I was able to appreciate it with my dad before I lost him 2 years later to prostate cancer, and I went to game 2 of the World Series. He couldn't go because his health was declining. But when I came in that night after Podsednik walked us off, there was the biggest, cheesiest grin on my dad's face. And he said, "How loud was it?" I said, "Dad, you remember the first game we ever went to?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "You remember the first game? Remember the first year we went to where the Sox won a division?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Multiply that by the number of people that are in Chicago and you'll get what happens when 40,000 fans come together to see a miraculous finish like I just did. And it was that moment he put his arm around my shoulder and he said, I love what you do as a broadcaster, and I want you to keep pursuing it. He was my biggest advocate. He was my
Oh,
biggest critic. And when it came to that, when I first started, he said, go with it.
you're gonna make me cry now. Because my dad built my first press box when I was in like grade 10, or
Beautiful.
what you would call it, sophomore year.
Yeah,
I think.
sophomore year. Yep.
In Canada, we go by the grades, the numbers. But he built my first press box when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I'm getting the waterworks here. And I get that everybody wants to be in broadcasting. I get it's fun, but I also follow you and I see you broadcasting from a damn plywood table in the rain.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
Still today, right? Like
Yes, sir.
if you don't love it, don't do it. And
Exactly.
and then again, but we've had those championship moments at the end. Some people never do reach those moments in our business or in the sports business, but when they do, it's such an unbelievable story. Like Paul Maurice, the coach of the Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was saying, have you been to Canada, Snowman?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not
I
yet.
don't. They love hockey. My wife Serena says they love hockey in Canada as much as Americans love basketball, baseball, and football combined.
It's the
like
truth.
it's the only sport they really follow. So everybody thought it'd be a real nice story for the Edmonton Oilers of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to win the Stanley Cup. And Paul Maurice,
Mhm.
who is Canadian, said,
Yep.
"I've been after this for 30 years. I'd kind of like one too."
Yes.
30 years is a long time to wait. And I go back to that Panther thing. There was just a lot of guys and gals that have been with the team for 26, 29, 30 years. That is a long time to wait for something, because in the Canadian Football League, I waited 9 years for my first championship.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed like an eternity. I'd given up 5 times that we were ever going to get to a championship. And then you do. Which reminds me of a whole other story. Man, our chats are easy, aren't they, Snowman?
Since day one, since
Yeah.
the day we met, man.
Yeah,
when you were up in the bunker.
Yeah,
You
with
know?
NFL firing up, I'm going to have to get you on here right away, and we'll talk to producer Clark about that.
You got it. You got it.
But my point on all that is it does make it worth the wait. And then when they had the parade, I'm in Canada now, right? I'm calling baseball this summer, so. I had a lot of my friends after they won the Stanley Cup, the Panthers won the cup. They're like, you got to come down for the parade. And I'm like, called my wife. I'm like, how do you feel about it? Because the baseball team here was like, hey, if you want to go, go. And she goes, well, it's pretty expensive plane tickets, a long ways to come just for an afternoon. She's like, I'm coming up there before long. So I didn't go. And I kind of sat there and thought, this is a celebration for that gang for the first 30 years. Big party. I plan to be there for the next 30 years. So you guys all have your party. You've earned it. I don't. So when you say this Stanley Cup, it's not in any way me. I do a little podcast that's turned out to do quite well because there was nobody else doing it in Florida. Not well, anyways. Just found a void,
Yeah, it's the same here in Indiana, where my wife and I are in our area down south of Indianapolis with our coverage of the Colts, and she assists me. My wife assists me on my NFL coverage. She makes sure all the checklists are done and everything's ready here in the office, especially since I've been recovering from so many health ailments. She just makes sure everything is there and everything is ready, but she also keeps me very, very grounded on whatever I do. And she always reminds me, remember why you got into this. And I was feeling so down after I came out of the hospital this past February. And she just reminded me, she says, that little team called the 49ers that you've loved since your dad got you into it? I said, yes. She says, where are they playing? I said, they're going to play in Vegas. And she says, remember, I'm taking Sonya to work that night. You have a Super Bowl to call. Hearing that from people that are around you and that love you dearly and want to see you succeed in doing this, It keeps you going. And I'll say it again, and you've said it very well also. If you don't want to appreciate the grind to get there, don't come there because it's not
Yeah.
worth it.
No. Yeah, you could fake that you love it, but you won't really love it, if you reach that moment. And by the way, it's been a long time since you and I talked. I was at Super Bowl, and I foolishly thought Kansas City Chiefs fans would outnumber 49ers fans.
Uh-uh.
It wasn't even really close.
No, it wasn't. And my wife Jody asked me, she says, "Who do you think is going to win?" I said, "Baby, I don't care. These two are going to hook up for the next three, and all three are going to be great games because we already played one in Miami, Super Bowl 54." And she says, "Are you going to cry if the Niners lose?" No, because these are two of the best in the business. And you got a quarterback that did I cry? No. I stayed on the air for another 90 minutes with a bunch of friends of mine, and we were breaking everything down from 6 ways from that Sunday. But I stood and applauded. I used the immortal words of Jack Buck. I stood and applauded for what was a great Super Bowl. And I know the window, like a lot of people like to say that the Niners window is closing. No, it's not. Do you know who's under center for them?
Oh, I know.
As Brock Purdy, as Patrick Mahomes got the grace for Kansas City, Purdy's getting the same for Frisco, and they're gonna hook up and do it again a couple of more times.
Did you think Shanahan blew it at overtime?
No.
Come on, man.
I do not think he blew it.
You think he? Well, the narrative was that he didn't know the overtime rules.
Yeah, you just said the key word, narrative. I ain't buying it until I hear it, and I didn't hear it.
You may never hear it. Nobody's going to admit they screwed up.
Well, I have to in this household because it's one of the rules, even though it may not be my fault. Jody finds a way to make it my fault anyway.
That's wise, man. That's why we have them, isn't it?
It's so much in good-natured fun, that she teases. Look, I'm wearing her team right now. I'm wearing the Indianapolis Colts. I had on orange earlier. I went and changed because people know with my health, I'm on blood thinners now. And I got cold because I had a short sleeve shirt on here in the office when I did part of the show. I got cold. I ran in and she's holding this for me. She says, I knew you'd need this. How has it been your first year ever calling baseball? What's the experience like for you?
It's amazing that you say that because I've been in the business 36 years. Maybe it's 37 now. I mean, I started when I was in high school, and I'd never done baseball, and I was a little nervous. I was at the opportunity because these days you don't get a lot of grace from anybody. You make a mistake, you're done. And but I made it very clear on the broadcast. This is my first season. Bear with me, and it just took me a couple weeks to figure it out. And when you say that, Brian, how is it? I equate it to a quarterback or an offensive and defensive coordinator that takes a half to figure things out. Don't think the game's over at halftime.
Right.
Because I'm not if I'm quarterbacking, because I'll figure this all out. So the groove and how you cannot take your eye off the ball. You can't. In no sport can you really take your eye off the ball. You can't. If you miss a pitch, how do you get to first? Did he walk? Did he get hit? Did he get a single? You know what I mean? Like, you can't.
Yes.
You got to pay attention, yet you're doing the stats thing. And what I wasn't prepared for was the downtime. I'd often heard how much downtime there was. And so what I started doing was, hey, if you're watching the game and if you're a fan of the Millers or you're the road team, give me a message on social media. Tell me where you're watching from and who you're watching and why. If you got any questions, then I came up with trivia. Answer me as the game was going along. All of a sudden, you don't feel alone in this booth. We're a community, and that's always been my thing in broadcasting, is make everybody feel a part of it, because everybody wants to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
So, and then I don't want to go on too far, but I mean, it's minor league baseball, so it's like a dimly lit park. It ain't, packed field in San Fran or anything. So when the ball goes out on a home run, I'm like, right? So I was trying to judge by the outfielder's body language of whether it went over the wall or, was he going to field it or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I can look at the ump. So it just took me a long time to remember.
Yes.
Okay. Because again, I grew up playing it. It's not like I didn't know the sport.
Right.
And the rules haven't really changed. We don't have replay in the league. So it's not ruining the game.
True.
It would be nice if we had a pitch count or a clock, because some pitchers take forever. And we had a 4-hour game here recently. I said to the guy that hired me, I said, you almost saw first tonight. He said, what? I said, the broadcaster leaves in the middle of the game.
When I was in Lewisburg, when I was in North Carolina, I did sports for a little junior college, Lewisburg College. They had one game scheduled on a Wednesday afternoon, and Jody asked me, what time will you be back? I said, it's a 4:00 pitch. I should be home by 7:30. I lied. I didn't get home until 9 because the game took 4.5 hours because it was a 15-12 game.
Yeah, well,
like you said, the pitchers were their own rain delays.
How many sports have you called, Brian?
7.
Wow. Well,
7.
For me, really only football and hockey. That was been my jam. So to be honest, I'm really, really, really proud to have picked up baseball and do well. And I have the parents, like over 60% of the players are from America, even though we're Canadian teams. Yeah. So they're coming up and they're like, Rod, you've come so far. And I'm like, are you saying I was crappy before? But let's be honest, I was. But they're like, I get it.
But they're being so playful with you about it. And they're picking at you about it. When I was covering Lewisburg, I did the same thing you did because they borrowed my audio feed and I was streaming on their YouTube page. And I was told right before the first pitch was ever thrown in my first game, you're going to have a lot of parents tune in. How are you going to handle it? And then he walked out and I said, okay, I know what I can do. I started throwing trivia questions. I started throwing numbers out there, and I said, "Look, give me a shout on YouTube. Let me know where you're broadcasting from." I had folks as far as Edmonton, as you say best, Toronto, get a hold of me, all the way down to.
That's the way they say it.
Yes, because every time you have a note about either the Maple Leafs or the Blue Jays or the Raptors, I always hear you say Toronto, and I just start laughing. And my wife heard it, and she says, "How did he say that?" I said, "He said it correctly. He said Toronto."
Toronto.
And we got it. Jody and I got into this fun, playful conversation about how to pronounce Toronto, and by the time we were finished, we were both just on the floor holding our stomachs laughing at this.
These are fun, really fun discussions in broadcasting. And I was saying this on my show today. I was trained by 2 legendary hard asses. Well, 3. My dad on the farm, who put the work ethic into me. And then 2 guys in radio, Jeff Courier, who I replaced as the football play-by-play guy, and Willie Cole was our morning man in PD. And they did not suffer fools. And you screwed up. You were going back and redoing it, right? And it was, you're pronouncing this Toronto, right? It was all about the enunciation. Yeah. And then I get on national television and all these people from Toronto. No, it's Toronto. It's not Toronto. Right. It was the people from Toronto that were telling me.
So they were telling you it's Toronto.
Yeah. And here's a guy 3,000 miles away telling me how to say it. I'm like, what the hell do you know? But furthermore,
it's good for me too, because I had so many people from Minnesota, and I used to live in Minnesota. I used to live in Minneapolis. I never said it correctly until I started talking Vikings, and then someone got a hold of me and said, "Look, you're saying it wrong." Well, how do I say it? You're not saying Minnesota; it's Minnesota. What?
Yeah. You sound like you're right out of To Catch a Murderer there. How to Make a Murderer for the Have you seen that show on Netflix? They got
Yes,
the
I have.
heavy, whatever you call that,
It's
Midwestern accent or like North Midwestern.
yep.
Anyways,
It's north. It is.
anyways, guys like you, me, and Rhino Radio appreciate chats like this. And again, this is the thing that young broadcasters that want to get into it don't understand. It's not about the
Right.
game.
It
It's
really
about
isn't.
entertaining and
It
keeping
is, man.
the
It
audience in the
is.
palm of your hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and hi Jody.
And they gotta have it in the palm. You gotta have the audience in the palm of your hand, because if you lose your audience, then everything's done.
Yeah. Oh,
Everything
you're
is
done.
just, yep.
Go off the air. You're done.
You're off the air and you're done. And you're done. Rod Pedersen, my dear friend, joining me here for another very lively chat. Man, it's always fun having you on the air with me. I love you very much. I love your coverage of the sports that you do. I will always be a fan, and I will always be a listener. Thank you very much for stopping
Okay.
by.
Same here, Snowman. Godspeed, and we'll chat with you hopefully within the next week on my show.
Thank
A little
you.
NFL preview.
Thank you. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Be well.
Man, it's so much fun having Rod on. We'll be back after this.